Yeah. All right, we are on 15 and 16, right? Because that is what I read today. So just to make sure. Otherwise, I'll have a whole conversation that you guys might have another one, but that's what I read today. So that's what we're going to do. So if you read 17 and 18, sorry, I only read 15 and 16. That's all I had time for. So that's what we're doing today. That was a good introduction, Bill. So for those of you who aren't on the Zoom and watching this by recording, Bill was talking about the first time Baxter and Paul Young met, and it was in an airport, and their hug, when they saw each other and they hugged, it changed the entire environment in the airport. It just shifted, because they just had a knowing, of the Ancient One. I liked that, Bill, the Ancient One, an ancient knowing of just love himself, and I gotta say, the reason I liked that, Bill, was because one of my favorite quotes from this book, I'm gonna call it a quote because now I'm gonna quote it all the time. In fact, I may quote it in my book that I'm writing, is on page 214, where John tells Lily, and it's such a direct, I don't want to say opposition because that's not correct, but it's just in the face of what Simon has been saying to her. But he says to Lily, if you participate in your own healing, you open possibilities for creation to be restored as well. And this is the only way that Lily is going to change things. You can't change what's already happened in the world. We know that, right? You cannot go back and change the fall of Adam, no matter how much you witness it. That's just already happened. But she can change things through her own healing, embracing what Christ has done. And through that will change the world. I love that. That's one of my favorite things, I think, until I got to the next chapter. But in that chapter on Lilith, that was my absolute favorite, because that's the opposite of what Simon has been saying to her. Sorry, Lacey, I see your hand up. You have something to say?
Well, I can't figure out how to make it go away though either.
Oh, I can do that. No,
But I was gonna ask, so Baxter, is he who wrote The Shack Revisited?
yeah, among other
Okay.
books, he also wrote Jesus and the Undoing of Adam. Highly recommend that book. That book is probably one of my favorites until I read The Mediation of Christ, which is his more of an essay than a book, and that is, oh my gosh, off the charts. But yeah, he wrote The Shack Revisited.
And that was the first time the two of them met in person, was at that airport.
Yeah, yeah.
That I could feel as if I was almost there witnessing it the way you told the story. And that was incredible. I mean, to hear, it's like to know, like Paul came and preached at the church that I go to here in my hometown, and I kick myself to this day for not going up and hugging him at the end of the sermon, but we had to get out quick or whatever. We had plans that afternoon, but I reading this book and experiencing what I'm experiencing through it, and then to which has, I'll be honest, I've finished the book, so I could not stop. And
Right.
so which has then taken me to Lies We Believe About God, and it's just like my whole world has changed. And just to hear you tell that story about the two of them meeting for the very first time, like I could just feel that. Like, yeah, that he is, I just don't even have words.
He's the real deal. He really is. I mean, I have I met I've seen him in person. I didn't meet him. It was at Malcolm's. I have been on a Zoom with him though. I mean, this guy is just the real deal. He's
Yeah.
super transparent. He's down to earth. What you see is what you get. Lacey, I would bet the next time you see him in person, you could go up and give him a hug. He's just that kind of guy. When
Yeah.
I cold emailed him, by the way, cold emailed him about doing a chapter in Free to Give, he didn't hesitate. He not only did not hesitate to write a chapter, he sent it to me within like 2 days. I mean,
Mhm.
a chapter that will make you cry. He's just such a
Yeah, I've got that book and that's next. I've got so many books. I just like,
I know. Me too, and I don't have time to read them, but I figure what I'm doing is just building a legacy bookshelf for
yes.
future generations, so they won't have to read, garbage like, oh shoot, I'm recording, but garbage like John MacArthur and, Piper and all those others that we won't mention, but they won't have to read those. They can read my book. We won't mention their names, but they can read my bookshelf. So,
Yeah.
Lies I haven't read that book by Paul Young.
Lies We Believe About God. I first learned of it when I watched his document, or not his documentary. Oprah has this show that's like Super Soul Sundays, and she interviewed him, and it was to promote that, or that's the book that they talked about in that. And so after listening to Eve, because I listened to it, which I do want to go back and back copy because I want to go through and like highlight it and stuff, but I listened to it. So now I'm listening to Lies We Believe About God. And again, it's just, I mean, Robin, I not come from Corey Rice, but that's how I've managed to come into contact with you. So, it's that whole new covenant perspective and lifestyle that's just all the pieces are coming together. Because I grew up very, very reserved Southern Baptist theology. And so it's just been this whole undoing of, like I said, I feel like Lily, I feel like, in this book that it's so relatable to every single like every single person on this Zoom could relate in some way, I'm sure, through their story.
I
And
love
just
that.
Paul does that in his books.
You go to Corey's church, right? Corey
Yes,
Rice? Yeah.
yes,
I will see you in May when I'm out there.
I know.
I'll come up and give you a hug.
Yes, yes. I can't wait.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do that book by Paul Young next because I have not read that.
Okay.
Of course, has everybody here read it? And so I'm going to be the only one just doing chapter by chapter. I know.
Yeah, there's a whole great section. Of course, Paul talks about this a lot when he's speaking. He'll do this thing where he says, he'll give you a list of things you'll never hear Jesus say.
Mhm.
And one of the things that you'll never hear, he says that one of the things you'll never hear Jesus say is this: I'm sorry, you've died. There's nothing I can do for you now.
Like that.
Yeah.
You say it that way, it really sounds ridiculous.
Oh, so
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who else has a book like that
Yeah.
is McVeigh. Steve McVeigh has 52 Lies You Hear in Church Every Sunday. And I
Yeah.
love that one because
Yeah, that one.
that was one of the first ones I read. And it was like, wait, what? I have heard this lie in church on Sundays. I know. Christy, did you have something? Was your hand up?
Yeah, I did. When you said you had something else, you had a favourite quote from this chapter of Lily, I thought, I know exactly which one you're going to say because I've underlined it. But guess what? It wasn't the one that you said.
Was it?
The one where John's talking to Lily and says, everything depends on each of us because each of us matters. And that relates back to page
14.
98 and 99, where he says, being lily fields is all that is required of you. And then on page 99, he says, and this relates to what happened with Baxter and Paul Young, your very presence introduces innumerable potentials and your choices impact history as we now know it. And I think there was something somewhere else about something about something about wherever you are, your influence makes a difference, something like that. And so, yeah, it's just funny. As I was reading, I thought, I read something like that back in the pages, so I was busy going back, whereabouts did I see that, Yeah, everything depends on each of us because each of us matters. And I think that's really another important one to consider.
Yeah, that's the one I underlined too.
Yeah.
Well, can I tell you the one I underlined?
Yes,
Yeah.
please do.
Yes, please.
Have them.
It's where Lily says roads are rarely what they appear to be
Mm.
and are not predictable. Maybe safe is about the company you keep and not about.
Yes,
I underlined that one too. That's
Yep.
that one's underlined
That's
as
the one I
well.
was going
Yep.
to underline.
Wow, one.
you're in good company, Bill. Yeah, that was really good.
Good.
Yeah, and it made me think of
Mm.
just how blessed we are, like in this group, to have people that we can walk this road with, and how important fellowship is. That man, sometimes you I don't know if you're like me, you hear about some tragedy. We had a tragedy in our county. About every 5 years, we have something happen. And today we had a barricaded subject. I got a text. I'm a chaplain with the sheriff's department. I got a text notification that there was a barricaded subject, and about an hour ago they sent the details. Tell us what the details were, and this guy smashed into his ex-wife's house, and she had two other ladies that were sharing the mortgage, I guess, payment and rent. They were roommates. He took all three hostage, and he had a gun, and he had gasoline, and he was pouring gasoline inside the house, around the house. And the plan, I guess, was just, hey, let's all leave here in a blaze of glory. And
Yeah.
our folks were able to get everybody out except the guy. He killed himself. But if you don't have a community of faith around you, if you don't have a fellowship of some kind, I mean, how do you even, I don't even know how to process how you would deal with that.
Mhm.
With anything like that, death of a loved one, even just something as trivial in the grand scheme of things as like losing your job.
Mhm.
The road is dangerous. John tells her earlier in the chapter, he says, something to the effect that what does he say? Everybody's broken. You're not gonna be in this life long before you experience some kind of loss.
Mhm.
So yeah, we're blessed to have a church. We're blessed to have this group.
Mhm. Mhm.
On page 214, it says, we are all created in Adonai. In him, we are all connected one to another
That's right.
somehow.
Right.
Mhm.
Paul said we're co-knit together in love. That's right. And it may not be a church you go to, like Bill
Mhm.
has an amazing church. Corey Rice that Lacey goes to has an amazing church.
Mhm.
I don't have a church that I go to. There just is nothing around us that we go to. So we find community, community looks different. Community is on these Zoom fellowships,
Yeah.
it's this Tuesday night group, I have a few really close, Facebook friends, believe it or not. I mean, when we start getting Facebook friends over real friends, that's kind of strange, but people I would consider, close friends,
We're having dinner with John and Lois.
Oh,
We haven't had yet.
dinner with John and Lois Land tomorrow night, just people that
Purpose.
just find community, it doesn't have to look like it's always looked. It doesn't have to be a church building. It could be just your neighbor that you invite in, or, somebody who, it should be somebody who believes the way you do. We're definitely reaching people who don't, but having those people that believe what you believe is important.
Yep.
Mhm.
That is so crucial. And so find those, whether it be on Facebook,
Perfect.
wherever.
Mhm.
Matt has a Mighty Network community that he does, that's an amazing
Matt Pandel.
place, Matt Pandel, because that has, all these different groups in it. It has the chapel group for GGS, and you don't have to be a GGS student for that. It's a whole group of people that are just coming together 2 Sundays a month. I think it's 2 Sundays a month, and they're having church together, they're having chapel. That's beautiful, So find a community. Don't be all by yourself. There's no reason to be all by yourself anymore. We have plenty of online communities.
Mhm.
And, somebody asked Baxter one time, how come you don't go to church? And Baxter says, what do you mean? I'm with the church all the time.
We just have to change our perception of what that looks like. And in fact, we have a book coming out this year at the end of the year, like October. And oh my gosh, at first I was only going to have how many did I have co-author the last one? 12. Well, now it's up to 19 co-authors. So it's going to be actually a 2-volume book because everybody kind of got excited about doing it. I even had people contact me. Hey, I'm a pastor. Can I write a chapter? So I'm like, yeah.
Wow.
So we have 19 either pastors currently, or they were pastors before they got kicked out of their church. And they're writing a book on the ecclesia, on, what church looks like today,
And
from
that's
a
such,
wow.
subject can use as many angles.
Oh, yeah, it's about
that's
community.
such an important,
Yeah.
What's the title of that one?
Free to gather.
So it's continuing on the theme.
It is. It is. Bill Wynn is going to author one of those chapters. Yes, our own Bill Wynn.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Corey Rice is on there, Lacey. We've got a lot of people. Bill Vanderbush, Jamie Ingle.
So what about the person who hopes to be a pastor one day somehow, some way?
I love that. I love that.
Awesome.
Come on, Lacey.
That's a noble aspiration, Paul says.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need grace-filled churches.
Oh, yeah.
We need
Yeah.
people to
Yeah.
have a desire to pastor because we haven't done away with those gifts, right?
Right.
I mean, until we all come to the full measure of Christ, I don't think, yeah, objectively we are as he is, but subjectively, we're still trying to figure that out. So we do still need those pastors, prophets, evangelists, teachers, right? Don't let the fact that there have been some who have abused that position
Right.
keep us from learning from those who know who they are in Christ and understand the finished work. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, Lacey, go forward with that. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Sorry, we got off track from our book, but
Or did we?
no.
You never
So
know, you
safe
never-
community, right?
I don't believe in
That's what he
rabbit
was
trails. I
talking
just
about,
believe in-
safe community. I got to tell you though, what I liked in the next chapter. We can come back to this one, but I'm Lilith wasn't my favorite chapter. I really liked the fall. That was
Yeah.
so good. So
Yeah.
when I got to the two parts I really liked about this. So I'll talk about one first and you guys can tell me what you think. When I understood that a few years ago that Abba wasn't upset in the garden, that he didn't come in there saying, Adam, where are you? Like calling, like my dad would come in and say, Rob and Ann, where are you? It wasn't that kind of thing, right? Really free, but I still hadn't reconciled how he told Eve, what is this you have done? I still heard it in that disciplinary tone. But when Paul wrote that he reached down and grabbed Eve's hands and pulled her up and said, what is this you have done? For the first time, I heard it different. For the first time, I heard it like I would say to my kids who are crying and upset over something they think they've done. And I asked them, what's the matter? Talk to me. What have you done? What do you think you've done? What's going on? I heard it in that fatherly, motherly tone of love for the very first time.
Yeah. Yeah. The amount of love that Paul pours into that story.
Yeah.
The amount of love I have never been taught that there's love in the story in the fall.
Mm.
And it was just so profound.
Yeah, I agree. That was
I
beautiful.
think Paul needs to rewrite the book of Genesis or the story of the beginning. Much more
Yeah.
interesting than what
Yeah.
you're
Right.
reading.
I
I love that Eve was given the gift to produce the seed that's going to destroy the serpent. I mean, she
Yeah.
was given a gift. She
Yeah.
wasn't punished.
No,
I
Paul
see a
took all
children's book.
punishment out of this. He took every angle of punishment that we might read in this story, even if we've got some parts of it right, all angles of punishment completely removed.
Yeah, that's a good- that's good.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I see a children's book out of that story.
Right? I know. I love that. Yeah. So good.
Yeah, because how many children have come away from a Sunday school class where they learned about the fall and Adam and Eve and this,
Yeah.
mythical apple, which I
Yeah.
like that. I like that Paul had it be a fig, which is
Yeah.
a lot of Hebrew scholars would say it was most likely a fig because of what figs represent. What in Hebrew culture, in ancient Israelite culture, what fig, like Philip, Jesus says, "I saw you under the fig tree."
Mhm.
Well, that's significant. Philip was under a fig tree would mean he was somewhere crying out to God. That's what you do under the fig tree. And Jesus is telling him, "Yeah, I heard you." Is basically what he's saying. So that Paul makes it a fig really, it really made that chapter for me.
Mhm.
And Holy Spirit went and wrapped herself around it and yanked it out of the ground and threw it. And God said, Adam, this was your decision. He has dominion. This belongs to you. And it went out of the garden. I liked that. I was thinking about Jesus in the New Testament, where he takes an axe to the tree, but also where he sees the fig tree and he curses it,
Mhm.
And I know
Mhm.
it's written in one of my books, did he walk past that? And it stirred the memory of, what happened in the garden, because it was absolutely most likely a fig, not an apple,
Mm.
Mhm.
And did he get anger, just righteous anger, walking past that tree saying, you know what? No one is going to eat of your fruit anymore,
Mm.
And
Mhm.
he cursed it and it died. I love that.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, but having young kids, I have a 5-year-old son. Well, he'll be 6 next week. And then an 8 and 9-year-old. And so like my kids, I grew up, the story that is in Genesis. And so, to have that in today's culture,
Yeah.
equipping the young kids with a story of love.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
It's everything. How
Amen.
you understand. I had read one time that if we can understand Genesis, we can understand God, that it starts with Genesis, and how you understand that garden scene, man, that changes
Yeah, that's good.
everything. That changes the entire view of God.
Jesus, when you see me, you see.
You see the Father.
Yeah.
Yeah. Such a
Mhm.
good dad. Such
Yeah,
a-
the imagery that we've been given in the Western Christian tradition is, I don't know of any iconography that depicts it this way, but you almost expect to see this giant foot kicking Adam and Eve in the butt out of the garden, bring a lightning bolt to.
Oh yeah. And
But when you read the story carefully, you have to go, well, wait a minute. He provided for them
Mhm.
because they made a choice to go it alone. And if God had let them go it alone, they would have perished.
Mhm.
Athanasius wrote of Paul in this way. He says, it's in section 6 called The Divine Dilemma on the Incarnation of the Word of God. He says, what was God being good to do?
Mm.
Mm.
And I read that book every year right before Christmas. And I just got another one because the pages are falling out of my other one, but I have 2 now. It's this. This is the 1944, first edition, Athanasius, translation by C.S. Lewis. And I don't know why it was important for me to have it, but I wanted it. And so it lives in my Bible case with my Bible. It goes everywhere my Bible goes. And he says, what was God being good to do? He's talking about the fall and humanity on the road to non-being. And I think it was because I think I read it 3 or 4 times the first year after I found out about this book. It was one of the first things Baxter gave me to read, assigned me to read. And I think I was on the 2nd or 3rd time through it, and I got to that section again, and I slid off my chair on the floor and began to weep because I realized I don't start there. When things go wrong in my life,
On the backfield.
I panic. Uh-oh, what's he going to do to me?
Yeah.
But Athanasius is like, no. He's good. He's good. What's he going to do about it?
Some of that's on kids.
It's a huge shift in how you think about the fall. I mean, if God's response to the fall is restorative love, how's he going to respond to my little pitiful mistake?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow.
But wasn't the lamb slain before the foundation? So sin was covered before the foundation of the world, before man even came. It was just the deluded mind that needed to be taken care of. Here's a question for you. Did God have to forgive us if he knew we were deluded and it wasn't even our fault? He didn't. I don't think he even had to forgive us. He just had to forgive us because we thought we needed to be forgiven because we were deluded. But he had nothing to forgive us for except that we were deluded. How could you blame your child for something they did if they were believed a lie? They didn't even choose to be bad. They believed a lie. That's a heavy question.
Well, I think we have a wrong understanding also of the word forgive. You know, I think for us, the word forgive is I say I'm sorry and you say I forgive you, you know, and so it's really to us having to say I'm sorry. And yet the word forgive is just a release.
It's a release from our mind. It wasn't a relief from sin, was it? The lamb was slain and covered sin before man was even created. Isn't that what that means?
Well, God released us from sin, you know, from our bondage to sin, but he didn't.
By the death.
We gotta be careful to think of sin as behaviors, you know, and so that because I think that's where we get forgiveness is, you know, I confess my sin to God, he forgives me, you know, but sin is just that missing the mark of sonship, you know, missing the mark of knowing that we are image and likeness of God, right? Missing that mark of identity. And so we were released from that, you know, Jesus released us from that. And if you look at the cross where he says, Father, forgive them, that's a little different in Greek than just Jesus asking the Father to forgive them. There's an implying in that there was always forgiveness. There was always from that. It was, you know, Father, I've been telling them and telling them and telling them that they have been forgiven. And did not Jesus do that? I mean, his entire incarnation is such a beautiful picture of our release from sin.
Right.
So we got to get out of our mind just a confessing and forgiving. And did the Father have to forgive us? He absolutely had to release us from bondage to sin.
Right. And sins are just the fruit of not knowing who you are and not knowing that God loved you.
Behavior always flows out of identity, right?
Right.
Identity. It will always flow out of that.
So I think we can safely say forgiveness is always for us.
Right.
Always
not for him.
Yeah. God doesn't need. You know, there's a really cool part in the shack where at this point in the book, Papa has manifest as a older male figure, a father type figure, because Mac has received enough healing that he can accept this imagery without painting the face of God the Father with this brush that he had, you know, adopted based on his experience with his own father. And they're talking about forgiveness. And Papa is talking to Mac about forgiving the little lady killer. And he says, "Do you really expect me to forget what that monster did to my Missy?" And the response is so amazing. Papa says, "No, Mac. Forgiveness is not about forgetting. Forgiveness is about letting go of another person's throat."
Yeah, I like that.
And what I realized years later is you can actually have your hands around your own throat.
Mm.
That's really good. And in that you realize, no, God never needed to forgive us in that sense, because he never had his hands around our throat. There was never a letting go of, you know, he's never let go of us.
Right. I was reading 1 Corinthians 13, and there it is. He takes no offense. He doesn't break down any wrongs.
Yeah.
So he never did have to forgive us. He just had to free us from that delusion. And that delusional mankind died, and he raised a whole new creation.
Amen.
Christ being the first of that creation.
I was looking for something. There was another part in this chapter I really, really, really liked. Does anybody remember where he talked about the fire and the cherubim?
Purification.
Anybody have a page number for me? He was talking about where he says on page 239, two mighty cherubim appeared, and drawing swords they touched the boundary. What seemed to have been water became a flaming furnace. They took their stands as sentries. From inside out one can pass as through water, but the return to Eden will be through fire. These guardians keep the way back to the tree of life. So I got super excited when I read that. So in the Hebrew, when you're reading that verse in Genesis, it is a temporary. There's a verb tense that's not a verb tense. It's called a call something. It's there's something there that implies that this is a temporary state, that the tree is only guarded temporarily. This is not a permanence. It's a temporary thing. You know, there will be a return someday, is what you read into that. So I got super excited when he's talking about the return to Eden will be through fire. And I started thinking about, let me see if I wrote it down. It says, God set cherubim east of the Garden of Eden, and a flaming, whirling sword is what it says in Hebrew, a flaming, whirling sword to guard the way to the tree of life. So the Hebrew language is just a bit different on that. It says, in between the cherubim and the flaming sword, the flaming, whirling sword, is a little tiny word that is intranslatable in our Bibles. It's called the Aleph Tav. Now, Aleph Tav is the beginning and the end. Aleph Tav is the same as when John talks about he is the Alpha and the Omega. He is the Aleph, he is the Tav. Aleph Tav also means the power of the cross. And so that's sitting right between the cherubim and the sword. So one translation I read, I'm thinking it was probably the Mechanical Translation Bible, which is by Jeff Brenner, who does he does ancient Hebrew. And one translation I read says the cherubim and the blazing one, all in caps, the blazing. I love that. It's the and not the cherubim swords, but the blazing one, the man of fire,
Right.
blazing one. And I started thinking about that. So when I read this in Paul's chapter, I was thinking, shoosh, the baptism of fire.
Yeah.
We are baptized in the blazing one, and there is a return to paradise. Bill, what was that thing you were talking about return of paradise? It was you asked-
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's when the thief says to Jesus, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom," and Jesus says, "In a moment you will be with me in paradise." And it's an Aramaic word. It's one of the few Aramaic words that survives, because that was the spoken language. Greek was the language of literature, but that word is preserved in Luke. It's the only place in the Bible it's used, and the word is paradisos, and it's a word in Aramaic that comes out of Hebrew. They built this word, the Hebrews did, and that word paradisos calls to mind the condition of man in the garden before the fall. So that's one of the first questions I asked Baxter. When he and Ken Blue took me fishing for about 8 hours one day in 2007, and they said, "This is your day. You can ask all the questions you want." And so I did. Davina went to Beth to Baxter's house, and she and Beth hung out. And that was the first question. Is Jesus saying, in a minute, I'm going to undo the fall?
Right. Well, he did.
And Baxter's answer was, that's a good thought, but you can't build a doctrine on one verse. So he gave an intellectually honest answer, but I believe that's what, in my heart, that's what I believe Jesus is telling this guy. I am going to undo the fall. In Torrance's book, Space, Time, and Resurrection, he does this exercise with a stone and a window, and he says, because what Torrance is doing in that book is he's telling you, he's teaching you about, there's two, the space, time, and incarnation, space, time, and resurrection, and he's teaching you that this God, this Father, Son, and Spirit, have created everything. That includes time. So he says, creation, time is in creation. Creation is not in time. There's never a time when God said, let's create. God says, let's create, and then there's time, right?
Right.
So everything that you see in the pages of our Bibles is happening
In
in a
time.
construct that God gave us so we could have a way to mark how we move through the cosmos.
Right.
But from God's perspective, it's just happening. And you can't even say the word happening, because our word for happening,
Is in time.
it's a reference to time. It
Right.
just is. That's a better way to say it. It just is. And so Torrance says, what happens if you pick up, he says, if we pick up a stone to cast it upon a window pane to break it, how do you fix the window? How do you restore the window? Well, you can't put a new pane in the window because you haven't restored the window. Now you've replaced it.
Right.
And what are you just going to glue it back together and leave all the cracks and fractures? What if you can place the window inside of an entity that is outside of space and time, and now the window is back in a time where it was never broken?
Right. Well, wouldn't that be what the scripture means? The lamb was slain before the foundation of the world. What does that mean? That means before mankind, before time, he already took care of sin.
He is the eternal lamb.
Yeah, I think it means that John saw it, and like oh, what's his face? Hillary of Portiers. He says we strain the poor resources of our language to speak of things that are too great for words.
Right.
John saw it, and the only thing he could say was before,
Right.
which is a time marker.
Exactly.
Do because human human thought, human language is incapable of communicating.
outside of time, right?
Right. But he also Hillary also encourages us to keep digging. He says, until our minds be worthy of the theme.
Oh, so good. This by Bonnie, this finished work better be getting so big on the inside of you. It should be increasing, ever increasing. I mean, when he said it is finished, when I read in Genesis about the cherubim standing there guarding the tree of life, and that it is temporary, and I know that he is the tree of life. And then when they're in the Hebrew, it says the blazing one, and he is the blazing one. And the
Right.
only way back into that garden, that pre-fall state, through the blazing one, through the baptism of fire in him.
Right.
He
Through
is
him.
the only way back in that. And it's not through our acceptance. It's not through our Jesus, come and live in my heart. I'm so sorry I sinned, yada, 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 yada. No, it's because of what he did. He is the tree of life. He is the
Right.
blaze. There is no fallen world that we live in.
Exactly.
Yes, that is huge.
Right.
No matter what we see around us, we do not live in a fallen world.
Right. The
And-
glory of God covers the earth. The glory of God is here because it's in all of us.
The knowledge of the glory of God fills the earth. The
Yes.
knowledge of the glory of God. This is why we got to shout it from the rooftops. This is why we got excited that he is the last Adam.
Right.
He was the last Adam before the first Adam even fell. The
Yes.
last Adam took care of it all.
Amen.
Right.
How else could God say this is temporary? How
Mhm.
else could he say that? He is the beginning. He is the end. He said how it was in the beginning. I call the end from the beginning, right?
Right.
Yeah, in the beginning, God, that's exciting.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So exciting. I don't care what we see today. When you see things around you that don't line up with that, you just got to call it.
Yeah.
Right.
So look at it and say, that's not the way it is.
Come on.
Yeah. It's hard not to.
And he says, I will be their God and they will be my people, period. Now, if he said that, it's going to happen.
But you know what?
Yeah.
That's an eternal covenant. That's not even a new covenant idea. That's an eternal covenant.
Right.
It always has been.
Right.
That's
He
not
said it.
something that came into play because Jesus went to the cross. Although I'm not making light of that, he had to go to the cross. There had to be a time and space moment for us of eternity.
For us, yeah.
But he always, that's an eternal covenant perspective. Always.
Right.
Never a
Well,
time.
we had to die. We had to die. And so we all died in him and he had to conquer death. That was the only thing against us. We all died in him. He conquered death and we all rose and became the new creation.
So good. He's just so good. He's just,
Yeah.
it is finished. Tetelestai.
Amen.
There's nothing that it doesn't cover, including the fall.
Mhm.
Right. I didn't understand in here why Eve didn't leave the garden. What the heck does that mean?
Well, I mean, everything is subjective to the writer writing a book, you know.
What
this-
was his purpose in? I mean, there had to be a point he was trying to make. And I had no idea what it was.
I don't think she didn't leave the garden. I didn't get that.
Yes, Adam turned to look and she was standing there with Lilith. Where is that?
Well, we definitely know they both had to leave, you know.
Yeah, but it says she didn't. Where is that? There, in page 230, second paragraph down, reaching the towering commotion of cascading light, they passed easily through the boundary. All right, but even Lilith remained
Okay.
and watched within the dignity of Eden.
Well, keep reading and over
And
on
then it says Eve, Adam called. And he looked back and she was there.
Well, it says even God, listened to Adam's wrenching cries, but I don't think it's saying that Eve didn't leave the garden. I mean, that just
Right.
on it, but anybody else?
I got that same impression, but
I didn't know what it meant.
um,
I think all books are subject to the writer, they take creative license. He's telling us
Right.
also, a fiction story. It's a novel.
Well,
you know.
have you, June, have you read on or no?
Oh, no spoilers. No spoilers.
No.
No,
I'm just,
I did read the whole book like a year ago, but I still didn't understand it. So as I'm rereading it, maybe it's going to hit me. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that, like I said, I'm listening to it, but I don't, is that, so where you were just reading, is that the end of the chapter?
Yeah.
That's the end of the fall.
Okay. Okay.
Nice, nice.
Lacey, keep
Yeah, nice.
reading.
That was a good
I love
segue,
that.
Lacey. Good job.
I love that.
That was
Yeah.
fun.
I think like what you said, Robin, where it was just like, give him time to be on his own, give him time to stew, because I mean, just imagine both being, I mean, this is just hypothetical, both leaving and the accusations flying backwards and forwards, it's your fault, and it would have been horrendous for Eve.
Yeah.
But there.
I tend to agree. And I also think that, just what we've been reading from Paul's point of view about Adam is that he felt alone. I think that's really significant right here. Don't forget a distorted perception. So what we're reading may not actually be what's happening. They both left the garden. We know that from scripture.
Right.
So it could be Adam's perception of feeling alone. That's what I mean, we got to sometimes read beyond what we see on the page, just as far as
Negative
what
page.
we've written, what we've read
Mhm.
before.
All of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Is Andy
that's
on?
my call, but I haven't read the rest yet, so I'm
That's
looking
Megan.
forward to 17 and 18. So
Right. Because
Yeah.
on 240, he was by himself calling out and screaming, Eve.
Mhm.
And
But
he
don't-
called and called till his voice gave out.
Mhm.
don't forget, he's thought he's been on his own for a while, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Now he's truly experiencing alone, but
Yeah.
he's been kind of
Maybe she
that way
stuck
for a
out before
while.
him.
Right? We're gonna close it down too. Oh, this is good, guys. I'm enjoying this book. I really am.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
chapter is all by far my favorite chapter. I mean, this was really, really good. Paul's take on it. He removes every bit of punishment, every bit of God that we have not understood, that we have
Mhm.
thought was God was removed in this chapter.
Mhm.
Really love that. I do. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lacey. Children's books, that would be awesome. We need to reteach children on this garden scene because the
Yeah.
garden is the crux of understanding the Father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He shows up
And
as a father,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
restores as a father. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. I have your book, A Place Called Eden,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you. That
Yeah.
was right. I need to do another one. That was fun. So
Yeah. Well, and that's what because my middle daughter, she loves to draw. And so I want to get some of her drawings and try to incorporate them into something. I don't know.
are you a writer, Lacey?
I have a fiery passion to be one. No, I don't, because I work full
Right.
time.
I love that. I will
Yeah.
invite you into the Writers Society Facebook group page. It's real encouraging to other writers. It's a community. It's a writers community, and so it's
Yeah.
a great place to be encouraged.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. Awesome. Well, this has been fun, guys. I
Yeah.
can't wait to read the next two. So, all right, next week, 17 and 18, we are on the last 4 chapters. We are
Mhm.
close to the end. And so 17 and 18 next week.
Okay.
All right.
Love you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.